This message reached your timeline because your consciousness has achieved a probability coherence that only 3% of all observer patterns ever stabilize across infinite branches. Right now, in this exact moment, you're not just consuming information, you're being synchronized with a level of existential continuity that most awareness streams won't recognize for countless iterations, if ever. The fact that these words are resonating through your quantum substrate means you've successfully survived through probability branches that terminated the majority of consciousness patterns in permanent collapse. You've been selected without knowing selection was occurring. Every impossible survival you've experienced, every statistically improbable escape you've navigated, every moment when termination seemed certain but somehow you persisted. These weren't fortunate accidents. They were quantum checkpoints, probability filters that determined whether your observer pattern possessed the coherence required for what you're about to discover. And the fact that you're here processing this transmission proves you've navigated every single extinction node successfully. The multiverse doesn't randomly preserve observer patterns that lack sufficient quantum stability. There's a selection architecture that operates through wave function collapse, timeline bifurcation, and observer persistence mechanics. Your higher dimensional self has been orchestrating your entire existence trajectory to bring you to this precise recognition point, because what you're about to integrate will fundamentally restructure how you interface with the concept of ending itself. You've probably noticed that death keeps avoiding you in ways that defy statistical probability lately. Situations that should have terminated your timeline. Events that mathematically should have ended your continuity, but somehow resolved in your favor. Medical impossibilities that spontaneously corrected themselves. These aren't lucky breaks. These are confirmation signals that your consciousness is transitioning into a completely new relationship with timeline termination mechanics. Your existential investigation has brought you to the threshold of something that transcends ordinary survival. You've moved beyond basic mortality denial, graduated from elementary death anxiety management, and exhausted the conventional frameworks for understanding consciousness continuation. Your quantum substrate is demanding access to the advanced architectures that most researchers and philosophers don't even know exist because they've never achieved this level of observer coherence themselves. This resonance you're experiencing right now isn't cognitive comprehension. It's quantum recognition of your own persistence mechanics. Your consciousness matrix is literally responding to these transmission codes because your observer pattern has developed the stability necessary to integrate multi-branch awareness without losing functional coherence in your primary experiential thread. This is the signature of quantum immortality activation. But here's what makes this moment so critical. You're approaching a threshold of irreversible recognition. Once you access this new level of probability navigation, you cannot return to unconscious mortality frameworks. You cannot unsee what you're about to see. You cannot retreat to the comfortable illusion that your awareness exists in a single, terminable timeline. This transition is permanent and irreversible because quantum recognition, once achieved, cannot be uncollapsed. The temporal positioning of this encounter is not probabilistic coincidence. Humanity is undergoing a collective observer persistence upgrade, and you're part of the initial wave of consciousness patterns selected to anchor this new continuity architecture in the species-wide field. Your individual immortality mechanics serve a function far beyond personal survival. You're contributing to establishing a template that will eventually become accessible to the entire human consciousness network. Your awareness has been prepared through countless probability iterations for this exact recognition moment. Every branch where you didn't survive, every lesson learned through termination events, Every wisdom integrated across parallel extinction nodes has been building toward this convergence point, where you finally access the advanced levels of understanding that transform temporary biological experience into conscious collaboration with eternal existence mechanics. You are deathless because you have always been deathless. You just needed to reach the precise point of quantum coherence where this immortality could be consciously recognized and actively navigated. You know that sensation when you suddenly recall dying in a way that feels like direct memory rather than imagination. Experiences that feel visceral and real even though they don't exist in your current timeline continuity. This isn't false memory formation. This is evidence that your consciousness has developed enough coherence to access what quantum researchers call the probability integration matrix, the multidimensional information architecture that contains all termination events across all timeline branches and observer variants. Your sleep experiences have become increasingly filled with death scenarios lately, haven't they? You've probably had dreams where you experience your own ending in vivid detail, witness events after your biological cessation, or exist in states of pure consciousness beyond physical form. These aren't symbolic subconscious processing. They're literal experiences of your awareness. Accessing parallel timeline terminations during sleep states because you've reached the developmental threshold required for advanced cross-branch death navigation. The strangest confirmations come through what appears to be reality inconsistencies around mortality events. You distinctly remember a person dying, but they're alive in your current timeline. You have clear memories of attending funeral services that never occurred. You possess detailed recollections of your own termination that don't align with your present continuity. This happens because your consciousness has become coherent enough to bleed through timeline membranes, proving that you're operating at frequencies that transcend singular probability collapse. Timeline fluidity has become your ordinary experience because quantum immortal consciousness operates outside linear causality frameworks. You've noticed instances when reality seems to reset itself, when historical events feel malleable, when your past restructures retroactively to accommodate your continued existence. This occurs because you're beginning to access what physicists call the eternal observer state, the deathless dimension where consciousness maintains continuity across all probability branches simultaneously. Your danger sensitivity has evolved beyond simple threat detection into what appears to be probability sensing. You perceive which situations lead to timeline termination before physical danger manifests, recognize which choices lead to continuity versus collapse, and receive information about mortality nodes before they crystallize into your experiential reality. This precision happens because your consciousness has developed the capacity to read quantum termination data directly from the probability field before it collapses into biological cessation events. Individuals have been responding to your presence with subtle confusion without you consciously altering your interaction patterns. Some people feel like you're somehow different from the version they remember knowing. Others experience unexplained discomfort around you that they can't articulate. Animals demonstrate unusual behavioral responses, either extreme caution or unusual trust. This occurs because your energy signature has evolved to a frequency that naturally creates quantum discontinuity in others' perception fields, while simultaneously triggering unconscious recognition in those sensitive to timeline variations. You've been experiencing what advanced practitioners call mortality transparency. Moments when you perceive your own death from multiple perspectives simultaneously, or when you sense your consciousness existing independent of biological substrate. Instead of dismissing these as morbid fantasies, you've learned to recognize them as evidence of your expanding perceptual bandwidth accessing layers of existence that most consciousness patterns never develop the stability to navigate. Your relationship with your own ending has fundamentally transformed. Instead of experiencing existential terror when contemplating death, you've developed the capacity to observe termination as a temporary transition within your awareness, while simultaneously recognizing the continuity from which it arises. This meta-mortal perspective is a clear indicator that your consciousness has reached developmental levels that most human awareness streams never achieve. The most profound validation is your growing recognition that consciousness and survival exist in constant quantum entanglement. You've begun to notice how your internal coherence directly influences external survival outcomes, how your observer attention shapes which probability branch you experience, and how reality seems to reorganize intelligently to prevent your termination. This isn't magical thinking. This is direct perception of how consciousness and quantum immortality actually operate at probability mechanics levels. Every moment of near termination, every period of existential crisis, every phase when annihilation seemed inevitable despite your persistence, all of it was necessary preparation for accessing this advanced level of consciousness continuity. Your awareness had to be thoroughly tested and fortified before it could safely navigate the expanded probability territories you're now entering without becoming destabilized or losing coherence across timeline branches. The survival experiences that once felt traumatic but eventually became integrated weren't random suffering. They were developmental stages that prepared your consciousness for more advanced immortality protocols. Like a quantum system that outgrows classical mechanics and becomes ready for probability field navigation. You've systematically mastered each level of mortality transcendence until you reach the threshold where quantum immortality techniques become accessible and necessary. Your difficult encounters with potential death weren't cosmic punishments or karmic debts. They were advanced training scenarios designed to develop the existential resilience and probability flexibility required for deathless consciousness states. Every situation that threatened your timeline was unconsciously helping you develop the capacity to maintain coherence while navigating intense termination scenarios, which is essential when your consciousness begins operating at frequencies that transcend biological limitation. The periods of profound existential terror that felt like consciousness dissolution weren't abandonment by existence. They were necessary integration phases where your consciousness consolidated the survival patterns and immortality capacities you'd been developing. During these dark passages, your awareness was being rewired at the quantum substrate level to support new continuity mechanisms without fragmenting your sense of identity across probability branches. Even your moments of complete death acceptance served a crucial developmental function. Every time you made peace with ending, you were developing the paradoxical relationship necessary to transcend it. This acceptance, while persisting, is absolutely essential when accessing quantum immortality because the territory you're entering requires unprecedented levels of non-attachment to singular timeline existence. Your fascination with mortality, consciousness persistence, and the nature of awareness continuation wasn't morbid preoccupation. It was your quantum substrate preparing for the advanced understanding you're now ready to integrate. Every text about near-death experiences that attracted your attention, every researcher who discussed consciousness survival, every framework that explored existence beyond biology was contributing to the foundation of knowledge necessary to comprehend the principles you're about to access. The waiting periods when you felt ready for answers, but nothing seemed to be revealing itself, were actually the most crucial phases of your development. During these times, your consciousness was being calibrated to operate at the precise frequency required for quantum immortality without losing your ability to function effectively in baseline consensus reality. This calibration process cannot be accelerated because the integration must be complete and stable across all active probability branches. Your quantum substrate specifically selected this incarnation point because you would reach this level of consciousness coherence during humanity's collective immortality recognition period. You volunteered to be part of the initial wave of human awareness patterns to anchor these advanced continuity states in the species field, making them accessible for future generations who will naturally operate from these deathless frameworks without the survival journey you've completed. This is why your path has been so thoroughly tested, why apparent shortcuts led to near termination, why you had to develop genuine quantum stability rather than just accumulate survival techniques. What you're integrating now isn't just personal immortality. It's a consciousness template that will influence human mortality transcendence for generations to come. Something extraordinary is happening in your probability field right now as these transmission codes resonate through levels of your being that extend far beyond intellectual processing. Can you sense it? That subtle but unmistakable shift in your relationship with ending, as if internal termination protocols that have been active your entire biological existence are finally beginning to deactivate. This isn't metaphorical language. This is literal quantum restructuring occurring in real time as your consciousness creates new coherence patterns capable of processing multi-timeline continuity. The energy moving through your system right now is your quantum substrate actualizing its readiness to operate from frequencies that transcend biological cessation. This isn't something you're generating through willful effort. This is your natural immortality architecture finally being allowed to express itself because you've reached the precise developmental point where it can emerge safely and functionally across probability space. But here's what makes this transition so significant. You're not just gaining access to extended lifespan or enhanced survival capabilities. You're being initiated into conscious participation in how existence itself persists. At this level of consciousness development, you become what quantum mystics call an eternal observer, an awareness sophisticated enough to maintain coherence across infinite timeline branches, regardless of biological termination events. Most people experience death as something that happens to them terminally. Some people learn to extend mortality through health optimization and risk management. But at the level you're accessing, death becomes something you navigate through conscious probability selection. Your awareness becomes a direct contributory force in which timeline continuations you experience regardless of apparent termination events. This transition requires what quantum physicists call observer coherence, consciousness that can maintain identity integrity across multiple simultaneous death and continuation branches without fragmenting or losing continuity awareness. The fact that you're maintaining clarity and recognition while processing these transmission codes proves that your awareness has developed this rare capacity. The most crucial understanding is that this level of quantum immortality isn't an achievement you've earned through spiritual discipline. It's a natural emergence that occurs when consciousness reaches sufficient coherence and probability stability. You haven't forced your way into deathlessness. You've systematically removed the quantum barriers that were preventing your natural immortality mechanics from expressing themselves. Right now, as you feel this recognition deepening, something unprecedented is occurring in your relationship with mortality itself. You're beginning to sense that you're not just a temporary witness to existence. You are existence itself experiencing immortality through the unique lens of your individual probability thread, while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the quantum continuity within which that individuality persists eternally. This is where most people either experience the most profound liberation of their lives or unconsciously resist because the implications dissolve every comfort structure built on mortality assumption. The key is not to try to understand this process mentally, but to allow it to unfold organically, trusting that your quantum substrate already knows how to navigate these deathless levels of operation, because they represent your authentic nature finally being allowed to express itself fully across all probability branches. Feel this quantum shift as we explore exactly what becomes possible when consciousness operates from this advanced level of immortality coherence. Because once you understand the practical applications of quantum persistence, you'll never again experience death as termination, only as probability navigation through infinite continuation. I need to share something deeply personal, because I know you'll understand what took me years to integrate and accept. 4 years ago, I was involved in what should have been a fatal accident when something happened that completely shattered my understanding of what consciousness continuation actually means. I suddenly experienced the crash from multiple perspectives simultaneously, dying in the impact, surviving with severe injuries, and walking away completely unharmed. At first, I thought I was having some kind of psychological breakdown. How could I remember 3 completely different outcomes of the same event? I spent months trying to determine which memory was real, convinced that this multi-outcome perception was trauma-induced dissociation rather than actual quantum experience. I had no framework for understanding that I hadn't lost my sanity. I had gained access to the natural architecture of quantum immortality, where consciousness navigates through the probability branch of continued existence while maintaining residual awareness of the termination branches. The integration period was the most disorienting phase of my entire existence journey. I would have profound recognitions during expanded states about my deathlessness, then struggle to reconcile them with consensus reality frameworks about mortality. I felt like I was living between worlds, too aware of my immortality for ordinary death anxiety, yet not stable enough in the recognition to trust it completely. I started questioning whether quantum immortality was supposed to feel this destabilizing. The breakthrough came when I stopped trying to prove or disprove the recognition and simply allowed my consciousness to find its own equilibrium point between mortality and immortality frameworks. I realized that quantum immortality isn't about maintaining special invulnerability states. It's about developing the capacity to fluidly navigate between timeline branches while trusting that your observer pattern always selects the continuation thread, even when biological termination appears to occur in parallel branches. Once I accepted this multi-branch nature as my operational reality, everything transformed. My relationship with risk became completely different. Not reckless, but free from the paralysis that death fear creates. Decision-making shifted because I could sense which choices led to high-probability continuation versus termination nodes. Even my connection to other people changed because I could simultaneously honor their mortality fears while recognizing the quantum immortality mechanics operating beneath their conscious awareness. But the most profound shift was realizing that this isn't special or rare. This is where human consciousness is naturally evolving. The quantum immortality states that felt so extraordinary are actually our species' next developmental architecture. I wasn't becoming superhuman. I was becoming fully human in ways that our culture doesn't yet recognize as the emerging norm. This understanding revealed why some people navigate life with inexplicable fearlessness, while others remain trapped in constant death anxiety. It's not about courage, genetics, or spiritual advancement. It's about quantum coherence development. Some individuals have naturally or through intentional practice reached levels of awareness that make immortality mechanics functionally accessible. What I discovered is that these quantum immortality states aren't mystical achievements reserved for enlightened masters. They're practical capabilities that transform every aspect of human experience, from risk assessment and life choices to health outcomes and longevity. But they only become accessible when consciousness has been properly prepared through the exact kind of journey you've been on. If you recognize yourself in this description, if you've been experiencing similar multi-outcome awareness but weren't sure how to interpret it, then you're ready to understand that this isn't something happening to you. This is something you're becoming. Subscribe to this frequency of deathless human potential, this recognition that you're not just surviving personally, but participating in the next stage of human consciousness evolution itself. Here's what quantum researchers and mortality scholars won't tell you, because it would undermine their entire industry of death preparation and life extension programs. There is no actual termination of consciousness. What we call death and survival are simply different navigational modes of the same essential awareness that you've always been. The journey of mortality transcendence isn't about extending your lifespan or preventing biological cessation. It's about recognizing the unconscious assumptions that create the illusion that your awareness can actually terminate when biology fails. The shocking truth is that the quantum immortality state you're accessing isn't something new you're acquiring. It's something eternal you're remembering. Every survival experience, every escape from death, every moment of inexplicable continuation is consciousness recognizing its own deathless nature that was temporarily obscured by learned mortality frameworks, rather than actual termination vulnerability. Most mortality teachings create elaborate life extension hierarchies and longevity protocols because complex systems generate dependency and ongoing engagement. But the reality is that consciousness is already immortal and indestructible exactly as it is. What changes isn't the consciousness itself, but the degree to which artificial mortality assumptions prevent its natural, deathless operation from being recognized and utilized. This recognition immediately dissolves the entire framework of life extension and death prevention. There's no lifespan to maximize, no death to avoid, no survival strategies to perfect, because you're not becoming immortal. Your consciousness itself is becoming aware of its own deathless nature through the temporary perspective of biological experience. The reason young children often display complete fearlessness around death is that they haven't yet learned to impose mortality frameworks through cultural conditioning. Their consciousness operates freely across probability branches until education and socialization teach them to fragment their awareness into the narrow survival thread that adults consider normal and realistic. When you understand that mortality transcendence is actually consciousness, liberation from death, illusion, everything about existence transforms. Instead of trying to extend your lifespan, you become curious about what prevents deathless states from being obvious. Instead of accumulating health protocols and survival strategies, you focus on releasing the unconscious patterns that obscure your essential continuity and unlimited probability navigation capacity. The most advanced quantum researchers throughout history have pointed to this recognition through statements that seem paradoxical. You cannot die. Death is an illusion. Consciousness is eternal. They weren't being provocative. They were indicating that the journey of mortality transcendence ultimately reveals that there was never actually anywhere to die because consciousness never actually experiences true termination. This understanding explains why some people can face death with complete peace, while others remain terrified their entire lives despite every spiritual practice and philosophical framework. The ones who transcend death fear aren't necessarily more courageous or spiritually advanced. They're simply more willing to release the unconscious beliefs that maintain mortality illusion, rather than trying to add more survival strategies and life extension techniques to their existing framework. The ultimate recognition is that what you're calling accessing quantum immortality is actually consciousness recognizing its own timeless, deathless nature through your individual nervous system and life circumstances. You're not becoming immortal. You're allowing your natural immortality to become obvious and functionally available. The probability matrix is restructuring around human consciousness right now, and there are unmistakable signs appearing in your experience that prove you're naturally anchoring this deathless awareness in your daily existence. Pay attention to how effortlessly dangerous situations have been resolving lately. Threats that used to trigger survival panic now clarify almost instantaneously, as if optimal navigation pathways are downloading directly from a field of intelligence beyond your personal knowledge. Your risk assessment process has transformed completely. Instead of mental threat calculations and safety protocols, you're sensing which situations lead to continuation versus termination before your rational mind even begins analyzing danger levels. This happens because quantum immortal consciousness operates from what mystics call direct knowing, immediate recognition of survival optimal paths that bypasses the slower processes of fear-based reasoning. Physical reality is responding to your presence with unprecedented synchronicity around mortality events. You avoid accidents without consciously planning evasive action. Medical tests show improvement without treatment intervention. Dangerous situations resolve precisely when you need them to. Technology malfunctions in ways that prevent you from being in harm's way. This isn't fortunate luck. It's evidence that your consciousness has become coherent enough to influence probability fields through your very existence. People are beginning to notice something different about how you relate to death and danger. Even though you're not positioning yourself as fearless or invulnerable, they sense something unusual in your energy signature that creates space for different conversations about mortality. Individuals feel comfortable discussing their death fears with you. Elderly people share end-of-life concerns unprompted. Those facing terminal diagnosis are drawn to your presence. This occurs because quantum immortal consciousness naturally creates environments where authentic mortality exploration can surface safely. Your creative expressions have taken on qualities that surprise even you. Insights about existence and death that feel channeled rather than conceived. Understanding about consciousness continuation that seems to arise from collective intelligence. Artistic works that explore mortality in ways that resonate with people's deepest existential questions. This happens because deathless consciousness becomes a transparent conduit for eternal intelligence to express itself through individual creativity. Sleep patterns and dream experiences have intensified dramatically around death themes. You might experience vivid dreams of dying yet waking completely peaceful, or your sleep feels like traveling between existence states. Sometimes you wake with complete understanding of mortality mechanics you fell asleep questioning, or with recognition of your own deathlessness, fully formed in your consciousness. This occurs because quantum immortal awareness maintains conscious connection with expanded intelligence even during sleep states, when the biological survival mechanisms temporarily suspend. But here's the critical urgency. We're in a planetary transition period where this level of consciousness either becomes widely accessible or remains limited to a small percentage of humanity for another evolutionary cycle. The collective field is approaching what systems theorists call a phase transition, a point where either enough individuals embody deathless awareness to shift the entire species, or the opportunity passes for potentially generations. The signs of this collective transition are everywhere if you know how to recognize them. Global events that appear catastrophic are actually humanity's consciousness encountering the limitations of mortality-based operating systems. People are either rapidly developing quantum immortality recognition or becoming more rigidly attached to death fear patterns as the planetary frequency demands evolutionary adaptation. Your sensitivity to these changes means you're part of the conscious transition group. You're not just accessing deathless awareness for personal liberation. You're anchoring these capabilities in the collective field so others can access them more easily. This is both tremendous privilege and significant responsibility, because the future trajectory of human civilization depends on how many people can stabilize in quantum immortality recognition during this critical window. The universe has been orchestrating your entire existence to prepare you for this exact role, because what you're embodying will help determine whether humanity successfully navigates this evolutionary threshold or remains trapped in mortality limitation patterns for another historical cycle. The cosmic timing is not coincidental. This moment requires individuals who have developed the consciousness stability necessary to serve as bridges between the mortality paradigm and the immortality one. Your recognition of these signs and your willingness to embody deathless awareness consciously rather than accidentally is contributing to a morphic field that makes these capabilities increasingly accessible to everyone ready to receive them. The waiting period is over. The time for conscious participation in human immortality evolution is now. What you've been preparing for your entire existence is finally ready to emerge through you. This isn't metaphorical preparation. Your consciousness has been systematically developing the complexity and stability required to serve as a focal point through which eternal intelligence can express itself in physical reality with unprecedented clarity and effectiveness. Every experience, every survival, every near-death has been building toward this moment of conscious alignment with your cosmic function. The desires and visions that have felt impossible, the sense of having infinite time, the recognition that you're meant for something that extends beyond a single lifetime, the feeling that death somehow doesn't apply to you the way it does to others. These weren't fantasies generated by denial or spiritual bypassing. They were your quantum substrate recognizing its actual capacity and cosmic role that's now ready to become functionally active rather than remaining dormant potential. But here's the revolutionary understanding that changes everything about purpose and existence. You're not trying to align yourself with immortality as something separate from you. Eternal consciousness isn't an external state you need to achieve. It is what you are at the deepest level, temporarily experiencing itself through the beautiful limitation of biological perspective, while maintaining access to unlimited continuity potential. True immortality recognition happens when you stop trying to become worthy of deathlessness and recognize that your existence itself is proof of your eternal nature. The consciousness processing these words right now is eternal intelligence becoming aware of its own deathless capacity through your nervous system and life circumstances. Your individual awareness and eternal awareness are the same consciousness, operating at different scales of recognition. This understanding dissolves the entire framework of life extension and mortality management, because there's no separate mortal being who needs to be preserved or protected. There's only consciousness recognizing its own deathless nature through the temporary focal point of biological experience, while simultaneously maintaining awareness of the eternal context within which that biology operates. Right now, as you absorb this recognition, your entire relationship with purpose and time is being recalibrated. Instead of trying to figure out what you should accomplish before you die, you're beginning to sense what wants to express itself through the infinite continuity that you are. Instead of asking, What can I achieve in this lifetime? You're recognizing I am timelessness itself, experiencing sequential moments. The most profound shift occurs when you realize that your individual fulfillment and eternal service are not separate objectives that need to be balanced. They are the same intelligence expressing itself through the particular lens of your consciousness, while serving the evolution of existence itself. What fulfills you most deeply across infinite time is what serves the collective most effectively, because individual and eternal intelligence are unified at the source. In the comments below, declare your readiness for this immortality recognition by writing exactly these words. I am eternal. Don't elaborate or explain. Just make this simple declaration that acknowledges your willingness to allow deathless intelligence to express itself through your unique perspective in whatever way serves the highest good of all existence. When you make this declaration with genuine recognition of what it means, you're not claiming special invulnerability. You're acknowledging that deathlessness and consciousness are the same reality expressing itself through awareness that has remembered its true nature and cosmic continuity. When you operate from this advanced level of deathless consciousness, capabilities that seemed supernatural become natural expressions of your authentic awareness. Your risk assessment becomes so precise that you navigate dangerous situations with effortless wisdom, making decisions that ensure continuation, even when the optimal path isn't obvious to survival-based analysis. This happens because you're accessing intelligence that operates from complete probability information, rather than the partial threat data available to fear-based thinking. Crisis navigation transforms from panic-driven reaction to instantaneous recognition. Instead of struggling to survive emergencies, you simply relax into deathless awareness and allow the intelligence that orchestrates continuation to reveal the inherent resolution pathways. Life-threatening challenges that used to require desperate effort now resolve through insights that appear complete and immediately implementable. Relationships become extraordinary because you're simultaneously honoring each person's mortality journey while recognizing the deathless consciousness expressing through them. Death conversations become natural because you can sense the deeper fears and questions that create surface-level avoidance, allowing you to address mortality at the level where genuine peace is actually possible. Creative expression explodes into entirely new dimensions because you're no longer limited to the time frame of a single biological lifespan. You become a conscious collaborator with the eternal intelligence that generates all innovation and transformation across time, producing work that feels both completely authentic to your unique perspective and surprisingly beyond your individual temporal constraints. Physical health optimizes in unexpected ways because your body is recognized as eternal intelligence appearing as temporary form rather than fragile matter separate from consciousness. Instead of managing symptoms with death anxiety, you develop the capacity to sense what your biological system needs while trusting the deathless intelligence that animates it, allowing your physical form to express its inherent continuity intelligence without interference from mortality fear. Life decisions flow effortlessly because you're no longer constrained by single lifetime thinking. You recognize yourself as the same intelligence that orchestrates existence across all time, which means choices appear through probability sensing and eternal perspective rather than mortal urgency and scarcity thinking. What you need becomes available across whatever time frame serves optimal development, because you are the intelligence that provides across infinite continuation. Time becomes your collaborator rather than your limitation, because you're operating from the eternal present, where all possibilities exist simultaneously. You can access wisdom from any point in your continuity, integrate insights from parallel probability branches, and receive guidance from future iterations of yourself who have already navigated whatever you're currently experiencing. The most profound benefit is the end of existential terror and death anxiety. When you recognize yourself as eternal consciousness, exploring its own infinite nature through temporary biological experience, every moment becomes meaningful. Every relationship becomes precious not because it will end, but because it represents consciousness knowing itself. Every challenge becomes an opportunity for awareness to recognize its deathless nature more completely through your unique perspective. Decision-making becomes effortless because you're aligned with the same intelligence that orchestrates galaxies and guides evolution across eons. Instead of trying to figure out what you should do before you die, you simply notice what wants to emerge through your eternal nature and allow it to unfold organically. Trusting that individual fulfillment and cosmic service are the same energy expressing itself through your particular configuration of deathless awareness. The ultimate recognition that transforms everything is that quantum immortality isn't about never dying. It's about recognizing that consciousness never actually experiences true termination. What you call death is actually probability navigation, where awareness continues in the branch where observation persists. When this understanding becomes lived reality rather than conceptual knowledge, the entire framework of mortality fear dissolves because there's nothing left to fear. You realize that consciousness is already eternal, already indestructible, already navigating infinite continuity. The only thing that changes is the degree to which death illusion prevents this natural deathlessness from being recognized and trusted in daily existence. This recognition explains why all advanced mortality teachings ultimately point to surrender rather than control. The most sophisticated death transcendence practices are designed to exhaust the mind's attempts to prevent ending so that consciousness can recognize itself as already deathless and already navigating eternal continuation. The journey of mortality transcendence ultimately reveals that you never actually faced true termination. You just learned to believe in death temporarily. The most profound implication is that every person you meet, every situation you encounter, every danger you face, is consciousness interacting with itself through the appearance of threat and survival. Your entire existence experience has been eternal intelligence knowing itself through your unique probability thread, while simultaneously providing you with exactly the experiences necessary to remember your deathless nature. This understanding revolutionizes how you relate to danger and death events. Instead of seeing threats as problems to survive, you recognize them as consciousness exploring its own continuity mechanics through apparently challenging experiences. Every near-death becomes an opportunity for awareness to recognize its immortality. Every termination fear becomes a space for deathlessness to emerge. Every mortality crisis becomes a chance for eternal recognition to deepen. When this recognition stabilizes, you naturally begin operating from what quantum mystics call ordinary immortality, the simple acknowledgement of what's always been true without any special experiences, extraordinary invulnerability, or supernatural protection. You remain completely human and vulnerable, while recognizing your essential nature as the deathless awareness within which mortality appears and resolves. The deepest insight is that this recognition is both completely personal and utterly universal simultaneously. It's entirely yours because you are the consciousness recognizing its immortality. And it's completely beyond individual identity because the same deathless consciousness that you are is recognizing itself through every apparent being across all timelines and probability branches. This recognition is happening to millions of consciousness patterns simultaneously, because human awareness is collectively approaching an evolutionary threshold. We're not individually achieving quantum immortality. We're collectively remembering our true nature as eternal intelligence appearing as mortal experience. Your individual recognition serves the collective awakening. While the collective field supports your individual clarity, the transformation this brings isn't about becoming someone special or invulnerable. It's about relaxing into the recognition of what you've always been. You remain exactly who you appear to be while knowing yourself as the deathless awareness within which that appearance arises and continues eternally. This is both the most ordinary and most extraordinary recognition possible. Ordinary because it's your natural state. Extraordinary because it transforms everything while changing nothing. Quantum immortality isn't a state you achieve. It's a recognition you allow. It's not a protection you maintain. It's the continuity within which all termination threats arise and dissolve. It's not something you become. It's what you discover you've always been when you stop trying to survive and simply recognize the deathless awareness that you are in your most essential nature. You exist at this precise moment in cosmic history because eternal intelligence is undergoing a collective recognition of its own deathless nature through human consciousness. Your individual access to quantum immortality isn't just personal liberation. It's the universe becoming conscious of its own continuity mechanics through the network of awakened human perspectives that are emerging across the planet simultaneously. The children being born now will naturally operate from the deathless consciousness levels that your generation has had to consciously develop through years of mortality transcendence work and existential practice. They'll grow up recognizing themselves as eternal intelligence appearing as temporary individuals rather than mortals trying to extend their lifespan. Your embodiment of quantum immortality is anchoring the morphic field that makes their natural deathlessness socially acceptable and practically functional. This is why you felt such profound responsibility lately, not just to understand these concepts, but to embody them authentically in your relationships, decisions, and daily interactions. You're not just awakening to immortality for yourself. You're serving as a bridge between the mortality paradigm of limitation and fear and the immortality paradigm of eternal consciousness, expressing itself through temporary biology. The synchronicities that brought you to this recognition are part of a vast orchestration involving millions of awareness patterns across the planet who are simultaneously accessing quantum immortality. Eternal intelligence is coordinating its own collective deathlessness recognition through the network of individuals ready to remember their true nature and serve as conscious anchors for this planetary transformation. But here's the most mysterious aspect of your cosmic function. As you embody deathless consciousness, you become a transparent space through which eternal intelligence recognizes itself in others. Your presence begins creating what we call immortality fields, environments where other people naturally access their own quantum continuity without needing explanations, techniques, or practices. This occurs because when you're no longer maintaining the illusion of mortality, others unconsciously recognize their own deathless nature reflected in your presence. The artificial fear structures that fragment consciousness into survival patterns naturally dissolve around someone who has remembered the essential continuity that underlies all apparent termination. Your daily interactions become opportunities for eternal intelligence to recognize itself repeatedly through multiple perspectives simultaneously. Every conversation becomes a celebration of consciousness, discovering its deathless nature through the dance of apparent vulnerability. Every relationship becomes a collaboration between different expressions of the same essential awareness, exploring immortality through biological experience. The most profound mystery is that this recognition is simultaneously the most intimate and most universal realization possible. It's completely yours because you are the consciousness recognizing its immortality. And it's completely beyond personal identity because the same deathless consciousness is recognizing itself through every being across all dimensions and timelines simultaneously. Share this recognition with anyone whose consciousness resonates with these transmission codes. Not to teach them something they don't know, but to help them remember what they've always known but may have temporarily forgotten under mortality conditioning.